Okay, good morning. Today, as we schedule our activities, is the time for us to begin our introduction section writings as part of your major assignment that is required for this class. And as I promised in the previous meeting, that I would like to give you the template for our scientific paper assignment, which also includes the section where you need to write your introduction. Okay, so here in EduNext, I have uploaded the link to the required template that you need to use. Okay, so it is common if you are involved or if you are trying to publish a paper in a certain publications, they will send you some kind of a template or guidance that you need to follow, which basically meets the requirement that they need so that the manuscript that is sent to them have already in the correct form, or at least the arrangement or the outlines of the paper is already good, so that you just need to follow the corresponding sections that already present there. So for example, if you click this, okay, or if you right click and open in another tab, you goes to this one, and then you just need to download this one as the template. And then if you're able to open it, okay, if you're able to open the manuscript, then it will go like this. And then what you need to do is just basically to fill in the corresponding sections that you want to write on. So in this case, the objective is basically to write your title, okay, your name, affiliations, and then the first section, which is basically the introduction of your paper. Okay, the first part. Okay, so it's basically the first part of your paper, right? And also, if you since in the introduction you basically writes the background story or the relevant information about the topic that you want to present, the topic that you want to tell about. Therefore, if you already have several references, then you need to put also the references like this one. Okay, references like this one. So references, since the introduction is basically where you do a lot of literature review for this assignment, and then the title, name, affiliations, and also the first section, which is basically the introduction of your selected topic for this class. So please use the guidance that you have here. So for example, let me close this one. Okay, so here, if you are not if you are not that familiar with manuscript templates that one publisher usually gave to the writers, they usually have this arrangement. So for example, if I have my cursor here in the title, and then you click here on the styles, it will show you that this sections is correspond to the paper title, right? The paper title of your topic, of basically your topic. And then here, if I'm changing the cursor location to this one, author's name, so it will basically goes to author name. So the publisher or me as your teacher will know whether you follow the required template or not. Because whenever, so in a real situation is that when a publisher have the manuscript or the draft that is sent by the writer, they will not check the content first. Obviously, they will check whether the writer follow the rules or not, follow their follow the template that they have or not, because that is the first obstacles that every writer needs to avoid, right? So that make sure that you follow the guidance, and also if the publisher gave you template, please use them. Okay, and because that is because the simplest rejection of one author will have when they send a manuscript to a publisher is that they will check. Okay, the publisher will check whether they whether the writer is following their guidance or following their required templates or not. If not, then they will basically reject your article, regardless the content of the article itself. Even though the article is a breakthrough experiment, or the result is going to be is going to give or is going to have a big impact in the society or not, or at least in the scientific community, or in the research, you know, in the research topic, on the respective research topic itself. If you're not following the rules, then you will get rejections. As simple as that. So after you able to follow the guidance and also the template that is given by the publisher, then your article will be reviewed by a team of reviewer or team of judges that will observe the content. Okay, so reviewing the content is basically the second phase. The first phase is that you need to follow the required guideline or the guidance or the template is given by the publisher. Okay, so in this case, for scientific communication class, in my class, you need to write the title, your name, okay, affiliation, corresponding, and if you have corresponding author, use corresponding author. If you have a single name, then just put your name here and then your affiliation. You don't need to write the abstract for this assignment. Just write the first section. I'm not highlighting the first section over here because all of the information given here from the first section, from the first section here until the last sections over here will be beneficial for you in order to create a cohesive paper, because this is the template that we're going to use for our class. So your final paper, okay, your final paper that you need to submit in the final week of the semester is basically use this template. Okay, we're going to use this template as our practice in terms of following the guidelines. Okay, well, the template that I'm using here is taken from an AIP, American Institute of Physics preceding articles, which basically usually used by some annual conferences that they will publish it as a special publication taken from respective conferences. Okay, there are many examples of conference paper template, not only AIP. For example, there are also IOP, Institute of Physics conference series. They have their own styles. They have their own format for their template. And also in actual paper publications, for example, in the American Physical Society or in Society of Exploration Geophysicists, American Geophysical Union, or in Physical Review, etc. and so on. So each publisher basically they have their own guidance that you need to follow. And even the style of putting your references is going to be different from one publication to another. Okay, it's going to be different from one publication to another. So therefore, we also need to learn on how to create a good bibliography. Okay, how to create a good bibliography. For example, let me go to the browser. So for example, if you are familiar with Zotero, for example, Zotero, okay, this is an application where you can put your references in an order, okay, and then you may change the order based on the publication that you want to send to, okay, but it's actually compile the thing that you gather from the literature database. So for example, if you're using Scopus, AGU library, or if you're using Web of Science, etc. and so on, you may save the link of the corresponding paper using the Zotero applications, and then it will compile the required information about the journal type, the journal title, the article title itself, the authors, the affiliations, when it was published, etc. and so on. So in the next time when you're going to write a certain article, you just need to call, okay, you just need to call the database that is created in Zotero, for example. So this is Zotero, one example of bibliography indexing software. The other one is BibTeX. BibTeX. Okay, so BibTeX and Zotero is basically a reference management software. And then for this one, I think it is used if I think it is properly used if you are using LaTeX. Okay, if you're using LaTeX, then this one is going to be the reference management software that you may use for LaTeX. The other one is Zotero, and then the other one is EndNote, if I'm not mistaken. EndNote. Okay, another one is EndNote. Okay, this is also a software that you may manage the reference list that you have for a certain assignment or a certain article that you want to write. Okay, but this one is, I think it is it's not free. Okay, it's not free. And I'm not sure whether it has the free version that students can use to create their own articles. However, EndNote have collaboration with Clarified. Okay, with I don't know whether it's Clarified or Clarified, which is basically the institution where Web of Science is under. Okay, so Web of Science the alternative for Scopus is coming from Clarivate, which also produce EndNote. So if you have if you have references managed, if you have a list of references that you search using Web of Science, then it can be automatically saved in an EndNote format. Okay, and then if you have that compilation of references, and then you may select the required references that is appropriate for one article, then you may copy and paste, or you can generate the required list of paper, for example, like this one, into the template. Okay, so if you're able to understand how to using Zotero, EndNote, or BibTeX, then the next thing is that you may generate a code, or you may generate a sequence that will copy and paste the required references into the template, like this one. However, in this assignment, there are no need to use Zotero, EndNote, or BibTeX. Okay, for even for your final paper assignment, there is no requirement to use Bibliography management software unless you're going to practice using it. It's up to you, but in this case you may just write everything that you already read that you want to include it into the introduction. Okay, so this is the template that you need to use. Okay, and please, if you're not following the template, you create your own format, etc., and so on. The the grade for your assignment will be less than if you're using the template, obviously. Okay, so an example of last year's students who enrolled in scientific communication class choose a topic of monitoring of CO2 storage and enhanced gas recovery in unconventional shale reservoir. So this is written by Rati Pratiwi, where affiliation is coming from Department of Physics, Bandung Institute of Technology, Ganesha Street, number 10, Coblong, Bandung, West Java. Okay, Bandung, West Java. Which email address is this one. So it's okay. So if we are comparing, okay, if we compare this one and this one, it's basically have the same. It's basically have the same shape, the same letters, the same size, the same orientation, because this PDF is written previously in this template, and then it is saved as a PDF. So if you look at here, this one is a paper title. Okay, it is matched with the corresponding size and type of letter used. Okay, and then the introduction, like this one, is the first heading, which is the introduction, and then the paragraph. Okay, the body of paragraph is called as a paragraph, and you just need to assign it as a paragraph. So this is the thing that you need to practice, because usually maybe in previous classes, there are no templates that you need to follow. Everything is written based on the copy, okay, based on a copy from the previous class, for example, and then it is followed by the students who take the class after it. Okay, so now you need to follow this template. Okay, here in Rati's introduction, she wrote about the story on why CO2 storage is important, and then what are the effect of CO2 increase in the atmosphere, which basically nowadays it has a potential to change the global climate, and therefore the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere needs to be reduced, and the reduction needs to be done in a way that it will also benefit people who are living in the ground. So therefore, there are also problems, for example, of not subduction, but there is so in some area where water are extract or water are produced in some area where hydrocarbon and also water is produced massively, the level of stress or the pressure that a ground or a rock have when they're depleted of fluids, the pressure become less, and it makes a subsidence. Okay, it makes a ground subsidence, just like the thing that we saw in Jakarta, due to the fact that there are exploitation of groundwater. The water below the ground is going to be depleted as time progressing, and then the pores, which initially contains water, now is not. Okay, and then because the holes or the pores inside the ground is void of water, and due to the fact that above it there are buildings and houses and infrastructure that basically overburn the ground itself, so the pores becomes decreasing. Okay, the pores become decreasing, and then it makes land subsidence to the bottom. Okay, to the below part. Okay, so where initially it is here, for example, it has certain elevation, but now it goes down due to the fact that there are land subsidence due to water subtraction. And in order to avoid this catastrophe, okay, to mitigate this problem, we can inject CO2 that are surplus in the atmosphere to the ground. Okay, so in order to maintain the size of the pores so that land subsidence becomes minimal. Okay, so those are the ideas on why we do CO2 storage in the ground. And in this case, CO2 storage is conducted in unconventional shale reservoir, because in shale reservoir there are gas. So if you knew about the natural gas that we usually use for cooking, that we usually use to generate electricity, and then the natural gas that we use to many other applications in our daily life, it is coming out from shale reservoir. Okay, so shale is basically a geological quantities or a rock that exists in the subsurface, and the depth of the shale reservoir is usually about 2,000 to 3,000 kilometers below. And if the gas inside of the shale reservoir is taken, it means it has the potential to create subsidence. And it will be massive, because shale reservoir usually lies on a very wide area. And therefore, if we replace the natural gas, the hydrocarbon natural gas that is trapped inside that shale reservoir, and then we replaced it with a CO2 gas, it means that we have the potential to mitigate the land subsidence. So therefore, this experiment or this treatment is conducted in the area. And here, back on the manuscript itself, it is following the templates as a paragraph. And then the final section, it is given the references, which makes the introduction over here. So what you need to do in this assignment is basically to write a page or 2 pages of introduction and references. Okay, if you because here in the introduction is where you basically conduct or you apply your knowledge on literature review here. And then here is the title of your selected topic. So if you're going to talk about the analysis on stock prices, for example, you may choose that, and then you put the title such as Indonesian Stock Exchange Index analyzed using PCA method, using principal component analysis method, and then your name, your affiliation, introduction, and then you basically create a story. What is principal component analysis? What is the stock? How is the situation, or what is the condition of Indonesian stock exchange in the last 10 years, for example. What are the challenges in predicting the stock prices, etc., and so on. And then you talk about the principal component analysis that you want to use to analyze the stock price index itself. Okay, so here this is one example on how you create introduction. And for those of you who are familiar or who are used to write a paper, okay, maybe this example is not that, maybe the example that I show you here is not the best one, obviously, because I think most of you are still in the beginning stage at this point, and not many of you who has experience in writing scientific articles, and therefore this one is a first practice probably. So therefore, I just want you to have that experience, okay, on how you conduct literature review, and then you write it cohesively and logically inside of the introduction. Okay, so this is basically another introduction for you to write a scientific article that is usually sent into one publication. And then if some readers, or if there are readers who is interested in this topic, they will read it, and then they will give a response. They will give some kind of comments regarding this publications, and then the two-way communication between the writers and readers is happening, okay, from the correspondence between the author and the reader, because in the paper itself you have an email address where reader can basically send response or comments regarding the findings, regarding the conclusions that you have in this publication, for example. Okay, so so this is going to, so by writing scientific article, it's basically a tool for scientists to communicate about the things that they research, the thing that they look for details using measurements apparatus, using simple or sophisticated analysis method, so that they have a conclusion about the thing that they looking for, about the thing that they research on. And therefore, from the finding, and then they tell the scientific community or tell the general the audience about their findings, and then they get response from the community itself or get response from the general public itself. It means there are two ways communication between researcher, between people who conduct studies with the people who aren't informed about it, or people who have knowledge but also want to give comments about the results. Okay, so this is an example. Probably I will upload this example in the EduNext, so that you could compare the thing that you write with this one, but not to copy the actual article itself. Okay, you need to have your own topic. You need to create your own literature review that you need to write in the introduction section. And please remember, in introduction, you basically gave the relevant information for the authors. You gave reasons and goals why the topic is selected, and then a brief explanation on how this article is going to be written and what are the brief conclusion of the study itself. Okay, so if you follow that requirement, it means that you able to write at least a simple introduction of your selected topic. Okay, what else? Okay, regarding the application of Zotero, BibTeX, and EndNote, I will leave you to study about it. Okay, to study about it, because probably when you are working with the with your final project paper, with your thesis, or with your dissertation, or with your any other scientific article, or even an article that you want to send to a newspaper, for example, you have that relevant references that already listed, okay, using this management software. Okay, so it's basically compile the references that you gather from the online database. You could use Google Scholar, Scopus, Web of Knowledge, Web of Science, AGU library, AIP library, IOP library, Science, Nature, and many other online publication has a database. If you usually if you're able to download, and if you're able to install this application, for example, in Zotero, if you're able to install Zotero, then in this section in your browser, there will be a Zotero button. And then if you are looking for an article in Google Scholar and then you found it, and then you can just right click, or you can just click the icon or the Zotero icon that appear on the right corner of your browser, and then it will automatically save in the Zotero database. Okay, and then whenever you want to use the references for your article, then you just need to generate a code to basically call the list of references that you need to use in one article. Okay, feel free to study about this software, because it probably will be beneficial for you to use later on. Okay, instead of as a undergrad student, maybe you are not that used to using the reference management system. So therefore, if you are choose to write your references manually, then that is okay. Okay, if you just write here manually and following the reference template like this one, then it's okay. Okay, what you need to, but make sure you follow the guidelines over here. It is all written in English, and there are also guidance on how you write equations, on how you produce or how you design the position of your figures, for example, like this one. If you have figures for your introduction, it's okay. There also, I have shown you some example on research article that is published in Q1 paper, where figures can also appear in introduction. So if you want to put figures in the introduction, please follow the template that is given here. Okay. So for example, if this is the format of the picture is paragraph. However, the captions, okay, the figure caption has their own designation. Okay, it has their own labels, which is the figure caption. Okay, and make sure you follow this one so that you could produce the introduction or the draft required for this assignment, like this example given here. Okay, it's like Rati's introduction that I show you here. Okay, do we have questions from the students? So far, you have questions? Okay, if you don't have questions, then I just want to give you some kind of recipe. Well, it's not actually a recipe, but some kind of a guidance in terms of how you use. Well, first of all, I just want to announce a disclaimer that I am not the expert on the English language itself, but we already prepare some guidelines that you may use in order to create a sentence that is correct grammatically, and then the choice of word that you use is basically correct or right for that type of paragraph. So here I just want to remind everybody that you probably already knew from your previous lecture or from your classes in high school, or probably at this point you enrolled in a lessons in an English course, for example. So it's just kind of a reminder for you to follow the grammar and words rules that we sometimes forgot about it, which basically we need to follow this to avoid common errors in grammar and how to use words. Okay, and as a note, the thing that I'm going to show here is not only beneficial for you in terms of writing a paper, but also in terms of designing your presentation slides. Because sometimes when we see a sentence or a paragraph that is not correct in a presentation, you kind of bother with it. You kind of distracted with it, whether the author knew about it or whether it is purposely used for that presentation. So therefore, in order to make clearer explanation for the readers, we must avoid errors in create our presentation or in create our articles. And then even though we are not perfect, sometimes myself as a lecturer have mistakes in terms of the English language itself. And so therefore, if you have colleagues who are experienced or have knowledge in terms of the English language, please ask for their help to review the manuscript that you write, or to review at least the content of your presentation in the future. Okay, especially when you are planning to present your research in front of an annual meeting or in an international meeting. Okay, it means you need to have partner to review the content of your article or the content of your presentation slide in order to avoid mistakes and to avoid misunderstanding in the readers or in the audience part. Okay, it is quite a long presentation. However, I'm just going to show you the suggestions as quickly as possible. So in terms of avoiding common errors in grammar and how to use words in scientific articles and scientific presentations, we must aware that not all mechanical errors bother readers in the same way. So errors that few even notice is different from than contractions split infinitive. Contractions or the shortening of word, syllable, or word group by omission of internal letters. In strict analysis, contractions should not be confused with abbreviations or acronyms. Contraction may perform the same function as abbreviations. An abbreviation is formed by omitting the end of a word for which a full point or a full stop or period is substituted. For example, lieutenant, you can write it as this one instead of lieutenant in the full form. And then contraction omit the middle of a word that are generally not terminated by a full point. Example, LTD for limited, which is correspond to the parsero in Indonesian language. Common contraction that people may use in scientific articles or in scientific presentation. For example, I am becomes I am, etc. You are become your, okay, and similar with that. However, we need to understand, you need to have able to detect whether the contraction that is used in one article is actually have their formal or like this one. If the contractions is basically comes out from a slang, okay, you may not use that because English, as just like in Indonesian itself, in Bahasa Indonesia we have Bahasa Resmi and also slang words or Bahasa Pergaulan. So it also happens in English language, and therefore the contraction that you use in scientific article must be you must check whether it is formal, okay, and it is not coming out from the slang of the English language. Okay, so since scientific article, well, what I want to point out is that if you want to send an article as a formal publications, a formal paper that you want to publish in one publisher, or if you want to write your thesis or final project in the English language, then the body itself needs to be written in formal way. This is not this is not true if your objective is to write an articles in a newspaper that tends to the younger viewer or to the younger reader. If you want to create a book, a scientific book that aims for the teenager, for example, obviously you're not using a formal words, right? So the one that I'm showing you here in this class is basically the thing that you need to follow when you're going to write a serious quote unquote type of articles, such as final project report, thesis, scientific article that you want to publish in certain paper, or scientific publication that you want to present or that you want to write in a conference, etc. and so on. So these are types of publication of this presentation is aimed for. The rules for scientific communication means such as a book oriented to the teenagers, or a presentation that aims for general public or aims for children, for example, it will be totally different with the rules that I'm going to give you here, because this one is basically for those who want to write scientific articles in a formal form. Okay, so let us continue. Not all mechanical errors bother readers in the same way. So the previous one is about contraction. Okay, we talk about contraction or the shortening of words, and then now is a split infinitive. Okay, to boldly go where no one has gone before. The infinitive is to go, and it happens split by the verb boldly. Okay, split infinitive are frequently poor style, but they are not strictly bad grammar. In the example above, to avoid the split infinitive would result either in weakness, to go boldly, or over formality, boldly to go. Either would ruin the rhythmic force and rhetorical pattern of the original. It is probably good practice to avoid split infinitive in formal writings, but clumsy attempts to avoid them simply by shuffling a verb about can create for worse sentence. Okay, so we talk about errors that few even notice, and here are errors that may distract the readers or the viewer, such as missing intro comma, faulty parallelism, or unclear pronoun reference, and then error that disturb. Examples such as run-on sentence, it's and it's and spell checker ignored. Okay, so whenever you want to write an article in English, it is better for you to turn on the spell checker that is embedded in Microsoft Word, for example. Sometimes it is true that Microsoft Word itself doesn't have a database regarding scientific term, okay, scientific terminology. Sometimes they kind of ignorant about it. So therefore, even though we turn on the spell checker, our understanding about the language itself is also important. So because we are now, okay, in our senior year at least, we are already exposed to the terminology or jargon or scientific words that we usually hear during classes. So we need to make sure that those are properly written, okay, in terms of the in terms of the typology, etc. and so on, so that whenever the spell checker gave us warnings, we already sure that it is already correct, because it is a common word for that one particular topic or for that one particular subject. Okay, so the most important aspect of grammar is understanding what a sentence is. A sentence is a group of words with a subject and a verb that express a complete thought. Fragments, in other hand, is a being group of words that either is missing a subject or a verb, or does not express a complete thought. A run-on. A run-on is a two or more independent clauses that are not joined properly. For instance, a common mistake is to have a comma between the clauses. So here, I'm just going to give you an example of sentence run-on or fragments. So the first one is a run-ons. I'm not going to spell it for you, but you may look for yourself about this one. But at least in sentence, you may see that it has a clear subject, verb, object, and adverb instead of in run-ons or in fragment. Okay. And then in order to revise it for run-ons and fragment, you just need to add one or two sentences. One or two words, sorry. One or two words inside of the previous in the previous slide. Okay, so like this one, the rubidium has no major uses, etc., and so on. Now it is written as, sorry. Although rubidium has no major uses, it is more common in the earth, etc., etc., etc. So it becomes a good sentence. Note there are several ways to correct of this error. We can use addition of words. Addition of words inside of the previous draft, or we arrange it into a different way. Okay, so if it's the original form like this one, rubidium has no major uses, however, it's more common in the earth than zinc, copper, and nickel. We can also write it as rubidium has no major uses. Okay, we use this semicolon. Okay, we use semicolon. However, it is more common in the earth than zinc. Okay, so there are several alternatives that we can use in order to fix the arrangement of a sentence. Making lists parallel is another important aspect of grammar. Okay, instead of printed circuit bodies are limited to photos, etc., and so on, we could just write it as printed circuit board relays are limited to small coil photos and correct, etc., and so on. Okay, another one is animal that come in contact with oil becomes this one. Okay, and it can also written as this one also. Placing a modifier in its appropriate place is also important in grammar. A modifier or qualifier is an optional element in phrase structure or clause structure. The removal of the modifier typically doesn't affect the grammatically of the construction, and modifier can be a word, phrase, or an entire clause. So the original sentence is like this one. This protein indicate the body what hormone should be given off among other things. Becomes the proteins indicate, comma, among other things, comma, to the body that hormone should be given off. Okay, so instead of admitting the staff of Parks Department, the greatest problem was that of water leakage, becomes water from the staff of the Park Department, comma, we learned that the greatest problem was that of water leakage. Okay, other suggestion about grammar and words. Unclear pronoun references cause ambiguities. Okay, so here in this example, because the receiver presented the radiometer with a high flux environment, it was mounted in a silver-plated stainless steel container. So what does it refers to is not clear in the first one. So and then here in this example, if you receive an email titled "Win a Holiday," etc., and so on, the final sentence, this is a very malicious virus and not many people know about it, what this is referred to. So and then this kept with small t. What are the difference between this, and this? So we need to make our pronouns clear, that is pointing into a certain subject. Okay, so the objective is basically to make the reader or the audience that look on your presentation clear from mistakes. Okay, avoiding common errors of punctuation. Punctuation marks are the traffic signs and signals placed along the reader's road. It's basically on how we use comma and points, okay, or a period. Okay, they tell him when to slow down. Okay, the punctuation, the period, and also comma. They tell him when to slow down and when to stop. And sometimes they warn him of the nature of the road ahead. The traffic engineers do not always agree on what signs should be used and where they should be placed, and neither do writers or editors. But rules, okay, the common rules as given here. A colon, okay, introduce a formal list, long quotation, equation, or definition. A semicolon either joins two independent clauses or separate complex item in a list. A dash act as a parenthesis to separate items that cannot be separated by commas. And then comma is separated details in a sentence, whereas a period is basically where we end our sentence. Okay. We studied type of marsupial. So this is here are the examples on how we use colons, semicolons, comma, dash, etc., and so on. Okay, you can look at the examples here. But the main point is that in formal writings, what is on the left side of the colon should stand alone as a separate sentence. Once the list ends, the sentence ends. So in formal writings, usually the head of the sentence is placed on the left part, whereas the right side of the column is basically gave us about the descriptions or the details of what is written previously. So for example here, we studied 5 types of marsupials. This could be so here we verb studied, we noun act as a subject, studied a verb, okay, and then 5 types of marsupials is the object. So if we are not using colon here, it may form a perfect sentence. However, we want to add more informations of marsupials. So we gave examples of marsupials like possum, bandicoot, koalas, etc., and so on. So therefore, we use this semicolon. Okay. So, however, the list of words that is written on the left side of the semicolon itself can be a form of a complete sentence whatsoever. Okay, but now we want to add additional information about the marsupial itself, so therefore we use the semicolons. Okay, equation should be treated as part of the sentence, and therefore use comma over here. Okay, use comma over here. And then M dashes act as a parenthesis to separate items that comma cannot, like this one. Instead of, because two isotopes of hydrogen, deuterium, tritium, etc., and so on, we can write it as this one. Okay, because two isotopes of hydrogen, we use parentheses. Okay, instead of dashes. And then here in the second example, after 1 year, we measured mirror reflectivity at 96% dash. We use parentheses. Okay. Now we move on to the usage of commas. Commas separate introductory phrases and clause. After cooling, the exhaust gases continue to expand. We could write it as after cooling, comma, the exhaust gases continue to expand. And then here, comma separate introductory phrases and clauses, and here, comma separate parenthetical details. Okay, In this example, X-ray backscatter system, which are relatively inexpensive, require the operator's attentions, can be written as X-ray backscatter system, comma, which are relatively expensive, comma, require the operator's attention. Okay. So this the second format is better than the first one. And then the usage of comma is also to separate items in a list. Semicolons separate a complex list. So for example, this one, instead of writing the sentence like this one, it becomes like this. Okay, here we use colon, semicolon, and also commas in the same sentence. Okay, not all usage rules are constant with respect to time. Okay, these are the thing that is happening in every languages, including English and Bahasa Indonesia, because the rules sometimes changing from one period of time to another. So in the here in the 1700s or in the 18th century. When we write historical, it always preceded by unhistorical, because in the past this H is not going to be pronounced unhistorical, because history itself is coming out from Latin, but it is brought from a French or a Norman language, and therefore the H is silent. So So in the 18th century, when people pronounce history, it becomes history. Okay, the H is silent, and therefore they use an as the article for history, because but nowadays in the 1900s, which is close to our timeline in the 2000s. The H in historical is pronounced as H, right? So it is history, right? Which the H is not silent anymore. So the article now is used A instead of an in this case. Okay, and then for scientific communities probably knew about this. In the 50s, it is called as X-ray with capital X, and nowadays it is just called as an X-ray with a small x. And then in the 80s, in 1985, the 1980s is a plural. In 1995, the plural form of the 80s is becoming the 1980s without an apostrophe. Okay. Okay, not all usage rules are constant with respect to position. So like this one, William Strong and E.B. White, the elements of style, data, a plural. Okay, so this one, so here, William Strong and E.B. White, the elements of style is a famous book in terms of writing, writing articles in English. It was published in 1950s, if I'm not mistaken. So in 1950s, data is a plural. Okay, data a plural, like phenomena and strata. However, in Merriam-Webster Dictionary of English Usage, in its current use, data occurs in two constructions: as a plural noun, like earnings, taking a plural verb, and as an abstract mass noun, like information, taking a singular verb. So, due to the fact that the meaning of certain words is also changing from one period of time to another, then it also, in terms of the grammar, is also going to be changing. Okay, so like this one in element of styles that people usually reference to in terms of writing articles in the English language, and this is a very well-known book that people use, but it is written in 1950s, and the data itself is considered as a plural. However, in the modern interpretation or the modern usage, it can be regarded as a plural noun, as those is considered in the 50s, but also can be considered as a mass noun. Okay, the way we use words, short words are the best, and short words when old are the best of all. This is a quote from Winston Churchill. So when we are using words to form a sentence, the arrangement of the words in that sentence needs to be precise, clear, forthright, concise, fluid, and familiar. If we are not familiar with some scientific jargon, with a scientific terminology, maybe we could make our own definition, or we can make some kind of a our own interpretation for the sake of the paper itself. But we also, okay, as a comparison, could include the literal meaning of that particular terminology that we get from one publication as a comparison. We can also use that. Okay, not all mechanical error of users bother readers in the same way. Errors that few even notice. Okay, so this is a replications. Okay, common users of error that are possessive and subject verb disagreement. Okay, so sometimes we forget whenever we have a plural subject, we use a singular verb. Okay, this is common because we're not that used English as our first language. But if we want to, if our goal is to produce an article in respected publication, so we need to learn about how the grammar is. Okay, one of those is the subject and verb agreement that we want to use in one sentence. So here, okay, I'm just going to spoil the corrections. So here, the criteria for assessing in the environmental effect of acid rain are given in the next section. So here, the criteria, okay, the criteria for assessing the environmental effects of acid rain is considered as a plural. Okay, so we use are over here. And then so far, the daily number of engineers playing has or have remaining constant. We use has because the daily number of engineers applying is considered as a singular. Okay, as a third person singular. Okay, and many other examples given here. To decide upon the verb tense in a document, plan a reference for t equal to 0. So it's basically telling us on how, so it's basically telling us to review the tenses. Okay, we have present tense, simple, past tense, and then continuous tense, etc., and so on. Okay, so past tense is the thing that have already occurred, events that already occurred. Present tense is a timeless details or details at time of reading, and future tense are event that will occur after the project. So here are the example. If it's a past tense, it should be written as the pressure was, or for the experiment. We assumed, okay, etc., and so on, and was shown it back in figure 1, etc., and so on. Past tense, air is sent. So here, when we write a certain fact in our introduction or in our paper, we write it as a present tense. So for example, air is 75%. It's a fact. So we write it as a present tense. Figure 1 shows, okay, because we display figure 1 with its captions showing that information. Okay, the computer code in appendix B includes, etc., and so on. And then the future test, future work will focus on the detailed analysis on the modification of the code, or the addition of HPC, etc., and so on. Okay, the verb tense that refer to the document depends upon position. These are, okay, so where do we usually put the past tense, present tense, and future tense in our article? So here, usually in the introduction, we give presents like this one, okay? So these are where we put our uh, present tense located, and then result and discussion is also here. Okay, figure 1 shows the circuit that connects the light emitting diodes to the ACE HC11 microcontroller as one. And then in conclusion, okay, it's going to be similar to the past tense. Like this report has presented a design for connecting light emitting diodes and so on. Okay, and now we are talking about the usage of numerals when referring to measurements. When we use numerals, when we have specific measurement, for example, 3 volts, 2 seconds, 1 meter per second, and then when we state a percentage like 15%, monetary figures like $3,000, and large numeral like 5 million. Okay, and when to write out numbers, for example, counting 1 or 2 words, 23 gauges, or 20 or 23 degrees, for example. Informal measurement, 2 hours, and then first word of the sentence, 33. So we don't put any numbers in the front of a sentence. Okay, so we use word instead. Certain words are commonly misused, like this one. Okay, we produce a small number of autos this year, even fewer less than last year. So the correct one is the correct sentence should be: we produce a small number of autos this year, comma, even fewer than last year. Okay, and then the second example given here: the company's success depends on its employees, but the writing of the its itself doesn't contain apostrophe over here. And then the new material is composed of plastic and iodine. Okay, not comprised. And the last example is that it appears as if the Department of Energy will choose the third option. However, we usually hear, okay, in informal situation where it appears like the Department of Energy will choose the third option. That's the thing that we usually hear in informal communication. However, in formal writings or in formal, I'm not so informal. I'm talking about formal shape, the formal format of the writing. It should be: it appears as if the Department of Energy will choose the third option instead of like, because the usage of like is usually used in informal or not formal situation. Okay, certain words are commonly misused. Okay, these are another examples, like how we use principle and principle. Okay, because the meaning of the two words, even though it sounds similar, but it has different meanings. And then the talk centered on the principle of virtual work, and then the difference between regrettably and regretfully. Okay, and then further and farther, and then affects and effects, etc., and so on. Okay, non-words and nonsensical grouping of words also cause problem. Okay, these are the examples. Whichever design you choose is all right, but which all right? This all right or that all right? The correct one is this one. And then, irregardless and regardless of the shipping delay, the work will stop because of this wreck. So the correct one is regardless. Okay, and for students, I just want to remind everybody in the class is that whenever a teacher who are not familiar with English as their first language, sometimes they will use the words that is coming out from their head directly or instantaneously. So therefore, the thing that we teacher use in the class, you don't use it in the article, okay? Especially when you're going to if you're going to write a formal scientific article, please make sure that the words or the choice of word that you use is actually in a formal setting. Okay, in a formal setting, because sometimes the way that the teacher use the choice of word that teacher use in lecture, it is told so that the students is able to understand, have the simplest way to understand the thing that is given to the students, even though, okay, in terms of the grammar, it is probably incorrect. Okay, so please, as a student, you need to practice and also to gain more knowledge to differentiate whether this choice of words is formal and this choice of word is informal, because the thing that you write in a scientific paper, in your report, or in a presentation in an annual meeting or in a seminar needs to be formal. Okay, even though, and however, it is not true if you're going to present it in a general public or in a audience where the level of understanding is below you, then you might use simpler form that sometimes it not following the grammar itself. And one thing that I have from my experience that even though you are presenting in front of audience in, so for example, you are enrolling in a graduate studies, okay? If you are going to a seminar that is not in Indonesia, for example, don't worry to make mistakes, because there are people who are coming from countries where English is not their first language, and therefore the level of appreciation and then the level of understanding of people, okay, who use English as their first language is quite understandable, or they have a certain level of no not compassion. I'm just looking for the correct word of it. They will accept you regardless, okay, because they understand that you are not coming from an English language countries. So making mistakes in front of the audience when you talk about a certain topic is okay. But if you are involved in a graduate study for several years, it is expected for you to have that improvement in terms of the language itself. And so continuously improve your skills in the English language and also in the way that you communicate the feelings, communicate your ideas, communicate your topic that you want to deliver is going to be a good asset for you if you planning to speak in the English language itself. Okay, so practice, practice, and practice. Sometimes even myself as a teacher, I think it is already 7 years since I am graduated from the doctoral study. So therefore, on some cases, my English skills, and also my the way that I'm communicating in English becomes become worse from the previous period when I was in graduate studies. And this is true because I don't have that exposure to communicating in English regularly, in a regular basis. So probably the usage of my class, okay, the choice of word that I use in class is not in the correct or in the formal way. But here in the lecture, I'm always emphasize you the students to able to use formal languages so that they can write scientific paper in the correct form. Because if not, then the publication itself could not be understood by the reader. So do more practice. And then if you have assistance from a colleague or from people who knows about the language, please ask them for help to basically improve your quality, okay, and on the language itself, because it is true that that English language is not our first language that we spoke in the daily basis, and therefore, yeah, more exposure and more experience needed for us to make good quality article and presentation, obviously. Okay, next, generalities that are not anchored with specifics are soon forgotten. So let me, okay, so here, after recognizing some problems with the solar mirrors, we took subsequent corrective measure. This sentence, even though it is correct in terms of grammar, but the meaning itself is too general. Okay, it doesn't contain any specific. It doesn't give any particular examples on the sentence itself. So instead of writing like this one, we write like this one. After finding that high winds and not hail had cracked the 10 solar mirrors, we began stowing all mirrors in horizontal position during thunderstorm. So these are, so this is the better arrangement compared to this one. Okay, so okay, so even though sometimes we need to write something general at the beginning, but after that we put detailed information or specialties after the general sentence, and therefore, if we're not include that, then the sentence which only contain general information will be forgotten by the reader or the audience. Okay, first, precise language. You should avoid over specifying details. Okay, so there are some kind of a trade-off that you need to follow. Too much detail is not good, but lacking details is also not good. Okay, so for example, like this one, the number of particular hydrocarbon combination our study is enormous, period. For example, the number of possible C20H42 is blah, blah, blah. Okay, it's too many information given here. So instead, we write it like this one. The number of hydrocarbons combination in our study is enormous, period. For example, the number of possible C40H82 is more than 62 trillion. So instead of using the correct number, 62491, etc., and so on, we just use 62 trillion. So even the reader will have difficulties when reading the special 62 trillion 491 million 178,000. Okay, sorry, 60 trillion. Okay, 62 trillion 491 billion 178 million 805,831. So it's difficult. So instead of using the precise number, we just use this number instead. For precision, you must choose the appropriate level of details. So instead of operation at the plant stop momentarily, etc. and so on, you can write it as operation at the plant stop for 1/2 hours so that a valve in the thermal storage system could be replaced. Okay, complex wording buries ideas, so make sure you have that trade-off on which part you want to include informations or which part that you want to make them concise. Okay, and then stacking adjective before noun swallow the ideas. This is also need to be avoided. Okay, instead of solar one is 10 megawatt, etc. and so on, become solar one is a solar powered pilot plant located near Barstow, California, etc. and so on. Complex sentences is a misdirect reader, so make it simpler. Okay, so make it simpler. Streamline a model sentence. So instead of the one that is written in the left, write it as the one that in the right. An ambiguity is a group of words that can have more than one meaning. Make sure your sentence have only one meaning. Okay, because you are not writing a science fictions, you're not writing a narrative story. Okay, you're writing a scientific topic. Okay, ambiguity. You're not writing novels for this class. You're writing an article you're writing a scientific article. Ambiguities occur for many reasons, like this one. Okay, and therefore you must avoid them. Weak verb hide the energy of your work. Okay, so this one, a new process for eliminating nitrogen oxide from diesel exhaust, etc. and so on. And this one is, this paper present a new process for eliminating nitrogen oxides from the exhaust of diesel engines. So the two sentences here is actually a good sentence. Nothing wrong with it. However, the passive voice tends to hide the energy of your work. So therefore, I just want to point out that it is true that several publications choose to use passive voice because historically they always use that orientation for their papers. But nowadays, publications tend to be more active. So if the author use active voice instead of passive voice, it shows that the author itself is actively engaging or actively works with the topic itself. Okay, so here what I'm suggesting here is that whenever you write your article, it is okay for you to mix the usage of active and passive voice in your articles, okay, in your paragraph and so on. Because if you use passive voice too often, the energy of your work becomes unclear. Okay, because unclear. So therefore, you need to use a mixture of active and passive voice. And then even in an article, we cannot use active voice all the time. So therefore, the best choice is to make some kind of a mixture for active and passive voice. Okay, but I'm just going to point out that there are publications that require author to only use passive voice. It is true. However, for some publications in the current time, they tend to encourage authors to write in the active voice, so that the involvement of the authors is 100% with the work that they shown in their articles. Okay, to conclude, avoid common errors in grammar. Make common errors can be embarrassing and mislead the audience. So we don't want to mislead the audience or the readers. So avoid these errors at all costs. Please turn on the spell checker and then turn on the grammar checker and then rephrase to read off the ambiguities. To tighten your writings, eliminate redundancies and writing zeros. Okay, so instead of vibration measurement made in the course of the Titan flight as the Horizon 1, we could write it as vibration measurement made in the Titan flight were complicated by intense high-frequency excitation of the vehicle shell during re-entry. Okay, then pretension diction often cause problem with the tone. Okay, this is basically okay, approximately okay, the pretension diction often cause problem with tone because here some the usage of approximately can be used also about, but we need to be careful. So that the format of the sentence itself becomes it may. So how can I say? Because sometimes when we use about instead of approximately, the sentence becomes not that scientific, becomes not that formal. So make sure that the choice of word that you use in one sentence will not change the meaning of or change the nuance of the sentence itself. Okay. Because some can here facilitate, cause, bring about, implement, carry out, etc. Okay, to conclude, choose a good informative title, identify area of work. And okay, so these are the way on how we write our article in general. Choose good informative title, and then the introduction part is basically used to prepare audience and defines the scope and limitation of the work, tells audience why the research is important. The middle or the body of presentation or the article is to choose a logical set strategy, etc. and so on, which basically correspond to the thing that we already discussed in the previous lectures. Okay, here I guess we're already on the last part of our lecture, and here are the 20 most common errors that you may avoid. Okay. Okay, so these are the 20 most common errors that you can avoid, and hopefully that this notes will give you additional information to create your introduction better. Okay, so I will upload this lecture notes later on in the EduNext. Okay, and in the EduNext itself, I have shown you the template that you need to follow for the introduction. Okay, because if we look at our timetable, in Monday, you need to submit the introduction part of your article. Okay, the title, name and affiliation, introduction, and also the references if available. Okay, do we have questions from the students here about the assignment or about the course material that is given previously? Okay, if there are not, then I'm going to conclude our class today. Thank you for all your attention. We're going to, well, actually, we don't need to meet on Monday. We could meet again on Thursday to talk about how we create a presentation slide, if I'm not mistaken. So therefore, I would just want to allocate our Monday class for you to write your introduction. Okay, and then I will look out for your submission, and by the following Monday, I will give you my response to your to your introduction. Okay, so let me stop the recording now.